The 7 things you should be talking about today. Number 7.
It's President's Day, and there is now an organized series of protests across the country. And no matter where you're listening to this, there's one near you. Don't worry. It's a response to President Donald Trump's recent executive actions, and it has nothing to do with the fact that they lost an election. By the way, Trump could have done nothing for the last couple of weeks, and they'd still be having these. Okay? But we're worried about sweeping federal funding cuts and initiatives led by Elon Musk to downsize the federal bureaucracy. By choosing a holiday meant to celebrate the nation's leaders, protesters intend to underscore the urgency of preserving democracy, by constantly fighting against the elected president, holding politicians accountable, and reversing what they describe as an unprecedented dismantling of government functions. These people are morons. Speaking of morons, there are people who want President Trump's birthday to be a federal holiday as well. Please stop, both of you.
Number 6.
Let's see. In North Alabama, Huntsville, and Alabama's most embarrassing school board member, Andrea Alvarez, who has been accused of doxing students, a charge she denies, and I accept that she denies, attempted to shame parents who attempt to use Alabama's new school choice options to leave her school district. Huntsville City Schools' Andrea Alvarez wrote on Facebook that if you use school choice, quote, I think before anyone unenrolls their child from public school, they should have to look every other student in the school in the face and say, sorry, but my child deserves more than you, end quote. The statement argues that parents who unenroll their children from public school should face the moral weight of their decisions by apologizing to the remaining students. Ridiculous. Acknowledging that their choice implies that their child deserves more, which is pretty stupid because it implies private schools are better.
Number 5.
Vice President J.D. Vance dared to go to Germany and give a speech about supporting free speech to a group of Europeans who he criticized for their Soviet-style approach to censorship, arguing that free speech is a cornerstone of democracy. This upset the intellectual elites and the media in this country. So CBS News' Margaret Brennan countered by suggesting that free speech had been weaponized by Nazi Germany to enable the Holocaust, a claim that Secretary of State Marco Rubio vehemently refuted very strongly, stating that the Nazi regime was authoritarian and suppressed all opposition, which is true. CBS was not done because on 60 Minutes later that day, the network quoted Germans who were locking people up for, quote, lies and, quote, hate.
Number 4.
At a press gaggle in West Palm Beach, Florida, President Trump announced that he is spearheading negotiations aimed at ending the long-standing Russian and Ukraine war. What a monster. Just like Putin wants him to or something, right? Like that's how this all goes. Emphasizing that the conflict should have never started and asserting that both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, want to cease hostilities. In a move reflecting the gravity of the ongoing conflict, UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer announced his willingness to deploy British troops to Ukraine if necessary, highlighting the robust security guarantees that are necessary to achieving a lasting peace and deterring further Russian aggression. America is not sending troops to Ukraine. I'm just going to make that as clear as possible.
Number 3.
In a dramatic shift for policy, following President Donald Trump's executive order that ended the CPB One phone app on January 20th, when Donald Trump was sworn into office, the Jewish Family Service of San Diego announced the closure of its long-standing migrant shelter and the layoff of 115 employees. Why is that? Now, if you read some of the words out there, it's because of the budget cuts. But here's the truth. The shelter, which served 200,000 migrants by offering temporary housing, meals, and transportation, was funded by federal grants. But guess what? The shelter has received 0 people since Donald Trump has taken office. 0 people. That's what it's about. If you actually try to stop people at the border, you can stop people at the border. Isn't that nice? They're trying to make this a funding issue. It's not. It's a need issue.
Number 2.
A Marquette Law School poll conducted in early 2025, which is right now, conducted in the last couple of weeks, found a majority of Americans support some of President Trump's policies. I mean, this is a pretty wild way to frame this, but that is the truth. And it's true that Donald Trump's policies are pretty popular. Here they are. Ready? Recognizing only 2 sexes, 63% favor that. Expanding oil and gas production, 60% favor that. Deporting illegal immigrants. Yeah, people are in favor of that. You know what Americans have a problem with? Pardoning January 6th defendants. Not surprising. Renaming the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America. 71% oppose that. I'm telling you, it's going to be awesome. We're going to have an election where people are going to run on the idea that they're going to rename the Gulf of America back to the Gulf of Mexico. I look forward to that conversation. It's going to be very smart.
And now time for the number 1 thing you should be talking about today.
All right, guys. Huntsville is doomed. Alabama is doomed. The world is ending. If it's not about UAB, it's about Redstone Arsenal and Marshall Space Flight Center. The end is near. And according to the New York Times, the headline is really, really scary. And it's about how Trump is going to gut the Rocket City. And that's what's happening here. You need to be afraid. The federal jobs cut has shaken the Rocket City. As Trump slashes federal jobs, the Rocket City is shaken. Scary. The city is known for strong aerospace and defense sectors. The citizens are experiencing mixed emotions, reportedly, as federal job cuts under the Trump administration create anxiety. Okay, that's probably true. Government employees and contractors worried about the ripple effects. That's probably an issue as well. Others remain cautiously optimistic, hoping that the increased defense budgets and initiatives like relocating Space Command will bring new opportunities. Now, here's where you need to start asking yourself, what's going on? Well, Alabama United States Senators Katie Britt, Republican out of Montgomery, Tommy Tuberville, Republican out of Auburn, have emphatically reaffirmed Alabama's pivotal role in U.S. space exploration by championing the Marshall Space Flight Center, emphasizing its critical contributions to the space launch system and national security against Chinese competition. Tuberville specifically stated, and this is interesting, here's what he said specifically. This is a quote. The SLS will be fine. Adding, I know there's a lot because Elon Musk is involved in the DOGE situation. There's a lot of rumors out there on that, but I have full confidence in the SLS and the future for them. So that is the first you've seen of somebody coming out and saying, look, you don't got anything to worry about here. But last week we had Mike Rogers on this program, and he said very similar things. So the space launch system is what we're talking about, not the Street League skateboarding organization. So just know that. The space launch system, there is a lot of talk here that maybe it can be okay. So there's a lot of consternation here that people are worried about. That's true. I think a lot of it's being overblown. But if you're in this industry and in this world, you got to like what you're hearing here. So that's good information. Let's take a quick time out here. We've gone a little bit long. When we come back, we'll continue talking a little bit about this. I like what Britt and Tuberville are saying. We'll dive into that a little bit more here in just a moment. You can obviously weigh in. It is very simple for you to do. All you got to do is pick up the phone right here, right now. 205-545-9950. You can weigh in on any of these 7 things, or you can do this. You can get in and ask your questions for 10 with him at the end of this program. It is all very simple. 205-545-9950. We'll get to all of that when Tori joins us a little bit later, or will she? It is President's Day, so who knows what's going to actually happen. Anyway, we'll get into that here in just a bit. We'll also be joined by Jay Town. We'll talk about some of the legal issues facing the Trump administration. This guy understands a lot of it, so we'll talk with him next. Well, not next, but coming up here, right here on the fastest hour of radio anywhere on your radio dial.
You're listening to News and Views with Dale Jackson.